Great to have you here. My name is Alex, and I'll be presenting your part of the panel. Alongside, we have a few honorable guests. We say hello for the first time to Alex Lamba, who is joining us for the first time today. Great to see you here, or actually hear you here, but we don't hear you, so great to see your image here. Okay, so Jillian, who is Jillian? Jillian is a Canadian director. She first started with the movie Pop, which was selected for Telefilm's Not Short on Talent program at Cannes Festival. Then she directed 6 short films, which have been screened in over 75 festivals and have been licensed to CBC for broadcast. And in 2020, she makes her feature debut with Queen of the Andes, a deeply personal film about isolation, as the internet describes it. Now, a few people know that Queen of the Andes is actually the name of a algae, not anything remotely as fantasy as the movie title would suggest. It's something as boring as an algae. And I'm not saying it as for myself, I'm saying it quoting the main character, Pillar, who at some point says that there's absolutely nothing special about this particular type of algae because it does not do anything else but live in order to reproduce, and then it dies. And that's one of the main, let's say, central metaphors of the film, because as she is saying that, she is obviously thinking about her own role in what she has to do, her own part in what the government is trying to get out of her. And she feels she's reduced to being another vehicle for spreading mankind through or via reproduction, and not much more. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jillian. Is that what? Because that's what I got from it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the metaphor is definitely her kind of like restating the entire theme of the project. So yeah, very
All right. It feels horrible to just let you be on camera. So hello, this is me. Hi, Jillian. Right, because I'm a teacher and I hate it when I teach online and I can only see my face.
I am too, and it's the same thing. I'm always like, turn your cameras on.
Yes, but it does sometimes hamper the connection. We sadly right here I don't have the best of connection, so I hope you can all hear and see us. Is it okay?
Yeah, it looks good. Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, it's okay. So right, so this was a short introduction to what I think is the main conflict of the movie, but before we say anything else about it, I would like to share a trailer, and hopefully I can do that by switching to a Microsoft Edge tab. Just a second. Now, can you all see what I'm seeing? Can you hear it?
Yep.
Is it okay?
You applied for your first patent at age 12, and last year you became a PhD candidate at 23. You're quite the young lady, Miss Graham.
What was your assignment on again?
Bromeliad biota.
Julia Raymond, Queen of the Andes.
Graham?
Yeah?
Welcome to Generation 1.
If you weren't leaving, you'd probably only be a few years away from marriage and children anyhow. Just think of this as the same thing, instead of all the complications of finding the right man.
I don't think I'm going to tell anyone.
You have to tell Dad.
No, I don't.
How would you feel if I left forever without saying anything to you?
All of our elites will be given the opportunity to communicate
communicate via satellite with their loved ones here on Earth once they arrive on Mars.
Are you trying to run? They don't tolerate sabotage.
Maybe I can get you. Nobody gets out of this.
I mean, we're in the process of moving mankind to another planet.
They are matching strangers based on data, having them bear children, and they have no say in the matter. It's state-sanctioned rape.
Everything ends, Pillar. Doesn't mean everything's a failure.
It lives in the high Andes mountain range in isolation. It has a reproductive cycle of roughly 40 years, and once they flower, they die. Their only purpose is to live and reproduce. Do you know what I find fascinating about the Queen of the Andes?
Everything.
Nothing.
Right. Have you all seen the trailer? Yeah?
I have.
Yep.
Okay, so have you all seen the trailer? Some of you might have seen the movie as well, so you'll know what we're talking about. Yeah, apparently it's in the trailer as well, the moment. I haven't seen the trailer up until now, I just got it ready there. And my prediction that it's a very important moment was actually true, because it was part of the trailer. Now, before anything else, I would like to invite Jillian to tell us a few words about how the movie got going and what she experienced during making it, because obviously it's not one of those movies that has an unlimited budget, so to say, in terms of production value. So I guess quite a few corners had to be cut when producing it, and we usually hear directors talking about how they try to expand their artistry and come up with things, because you never feel when you hear like big directors such as George Lucas and others, you never hear them complaining about limitations. And this is one of the things that these kind of festivals and these kind of movies bring to the forefront. People who struggle to create art despite huge problems in terms of budget and time and all of that. So Jillian, you have the floor.
Thank you. The film originally was a short film, and I was having a very hard time getting funding for it. In Canada, I don't know what it's like in Romania, but in Canada, all of the film funding is government. So I was having a hard time getting it funded, and I really liked the story. I didn't want it to die, so I developed it into a feature, and then I applied to Telefilm as our national film commission, I guess. And they have a program called Talent to Watch, where they fund first-time directors to do feature films. And I was able to get funded through that. So we did the feature film. The budget was in US dollars, it was about 170,000 US dollars. So it was not very, very much, but I'm from a small city in a very small province. And I think one of the things that we've gotten good at out here, where we're in a part of the country that no one really pays attention to, is we've gotten pretty good at trying to do a lot with a little. And that was kind of, from the get-go, what we had to do in order to make the film work. There's obviously like this science fiction undercurrent that goes throughout it, and then at the very end there's a few things, and it's like, how are we going to do this with this kind of money? And it actually wasn't too challenging, because the whole film was meant to be very insular and very very contained to Pillar's immediate world. So we don't really see how this program affects anything outside of Pillar, which is convenient. And just in terms of like how we shot, the movie starts out and there's a lot more, it starts out with wider shots and two shots or shots where she's sharing the frame with people that she loves. And then as the film goes on and as she doesn't, she's decided she doesn't want to tell anyone she's leaving. She wants kind of those last memories to be kind of authentic, and that's what she wants to take with her. And as the movie goes on and it gets closer to her leaving, she starts to become oppressed by the frame of the movie. And she, we start just seeing her cutting back and forth with people, and it starts just kind of moving in on her very slowly. And so at the very end of the film, when we're kind of meant to see all these like big budget sci-fi things around her, like, the shuttle and all of these things, we were so with her that it was such a close shot that we were able to kind of, do what we could in one shot and make it work. And for the space agency, that was very, very basic. We just shot in hallways at the university. There was nothing, it's like we can try and dress something up, or we can just, lean into kind of like that lo-fi production design, and just, let it be very, very plain and very, very um undressed. And I think that was the way to go for the movie, and then also for us, because she doesn't know anything about this place. So I didn't want to put too many clues up. I didn't want to give her any information that the audience didn't have.
All right. Well, that kind of explains some of the things, and it's something that Christy Vickel here, who first recommended the movie to me, said, and I think he was spot on when he said that what he liked most, and it's something that I kind of got to acquire whilst watching it, and is that although it's a science fiction movie, the science fiction part is all sort of subdued and in the background, and it manages to build all these images without actually showing any of them, because we can already relate to images of ships flying towards Mars. We've had so many movies that show us ships and actors being on Mars and being on other planets trying to colonize. We know what they're talking about already. It's nothing we should necessarily
Yeah.
see. You chose to
I mean, I would
explore.
love to have a spaceship, but
You would have loved to show them a bit, right?
sure, yeah.
Yeah, but still,
But we work with what we got.
my next question would be, okay, it's a movie about, it's a character-driven movie. We watch the character, we feel for her. It's all about her and her relationships, not so much about visually challenging us with wild images of space exploration. But still, I feel there's also um, underneath the sci-fi and the personal relationship element, there's also a very powerful political element to it. And there are two things that have struck me. One of them is that people here in your movie seem to have a very, I don't know how to call it, very obedient and somewhat frightful relationship with the government. There's this government everybody mentions that seems to take decisions on a very non-democratic basis, and it chooses people and it sends them there, and you can't do anything about it, and better not be against the government because something bad will happen to you. Is this the sort of society you're depicting there?
I mean, it is kind of, I think it's more representative of like the actual, um, how things are. I was thinking about it in terms of like the draft during the war, when people were just kind of, their birthdays were pulled out of a hat and they were drafted and told that they were going to go serve overseas. And it was kind of like that idea, it's like when the government says you're going. And she does talk briefly about the idea of like, what if I just, what if I dodged the draft? What if I ran? But that doesn't, it's not really a possibility, because we know that everyone in her generation has these microchips so their children don't go missing. But also, if she, everything she wants to stay, all the reasons she wants to stay, for her family and her girlfriend and her work and all of that, if she runs away, she still loses all of that. So it's different than just, dodging the draft for a few years and coming back. She really truly doesn't have a choice. He's been chosen and she's going to go. And um, there's a moment we think she's not, but that's there wasn't really ever any part of the story that felt like she was gonna be able to be bigger than what the government wanted. And it's weird now because, like, this was made before COVID, and now we have COVID, and we have, in Canada, things have been, like, pretty good for, I mean, it's not great, but it's decent for, people, getting vaccines and all of that, and, like, there's so much discourse right now around, like, making people wear masks and making people get vaccinated, and, people who don't want to, talking about, like their freedoms and things. And it's just like so interesting that I feel like some of the themes of this pandemic and some of the themes of the film are kind of like weirdly aligned in like a depressing way.
Yeah, actually, yeah, but I'm not sure you've expected that this is how things will turn out, because your movie, at least as I read it, let's say, seems to speak all in favor of personal individual choice, in contrast to what some people might call the greater good of the species, because that's kind of the main conflict that she's having. And it's there's a very nice metaphor, by the way, when she always says that this is not her idea, that science does not belong to her, it belongs to people. It's something like it's the idea that matters, not the person discovering it, expressing
Yeah.
it. But then at some point she gets really upset when this I'm sorry, can I use the word asshole?
You can say it.
This unsavory fellow comes along and says, like, hey, you should not go to Berlin. I should go to Berlin. I'm better than you. What do you do? Blah, blah, woman, stupid woman. And then she says, it's mine. She then
Yeah.
sort of starts taking it as her own in a very interesting moment. So, thinking about that, what would you, because now you have like, okay, we should wear masks, we should get vaccinated, we also should follow all the regulations because it's for the good of everyone in our community, in our
Yeah.
country. Isn't that sort of like the same as the government asking, well, we should send people there and you should comply with what we're saying and you should reproduce because it's for the good of the species to find another haven and multiply there and offer a second chance to people on Earth. Don't you think they're similar in that way?
I think they're similar in that way, in that it's something that, nobody asked for that is being asked of you. You're in essence, you're being asked to kind of serve your community, serve the greater good. I think what I really liked, I made this movie because I wanted to really explore the theme of isolation. And I think, the pandemic is very isolating to a lot of people. Everyone kind of has their own unique perspective on it or their own challenges or, what have you. But um, I think there's something almost comforting in knowing that everyone is in the same boat and everyone is going through the same thing for better or worse. Versus like with this, like we never meet another person who's been chosen. She never meets another person that's been chosen. And, I really like what you said about, she talks about how like, science isn't about individuals, it's about ideas. And that's so true. But then she's still a person and she's still human. And she has that moment of frustration where she's like, no, like it's right. Like that's my idea. And I think it just kind of illustrates the kind of struggle that we have, like Canadians are like culturally we're very like community rather than individual. Um but at the same time, like no matter how powerful your relationships are to communities or your relationships are to people that you know and love, life is still a singular journey and you're still always experiencing it as an individual. And that was really what I wanted to explore with the story. And so I think there are elements of that to the pandemic as well. But it's also something that, in like a super shitty way, like unites us all because we're all, we all have to live with it and we all have to do what we've got to do to keep each other safe.
I get your point. I also imagine that you said, okay, we're in the pandemic together, but her case is that she's been specially selected. But I would argue that the pandemic does not reflect equally on all of us. For instance, there are doctors who are constantly in the front line and constantly exposing themselves to more pandemic danger. And I think they are in a class of their own. And when it comes to facing danger, they can't just very well say, you know, I don't, I don't like the fact that I'm here. I should be treated equally by the virus, so I'm gonna go home and let
Sure.
somebody else do my job. You can't do that. So there's just some people who have to be there and have to do more because it's their role there. So getting back to your movie, and this was a question that baffled me throughout the entire picture, is keep in mind this comparison with doctors. Why? What criteria did the government use to select her, who seems throughout the movie so miserable with that decision, and who does have a clear, let's say, negative characteristics that would make her unsuitable for selection? Meaning, I think she's well, first of all, unsuitable for reproduction because she seems to be a lesbian and she has a girlfriend. So, I mean, doesn't the government have criteria that will enable people who are actually more suitable and would offer themselves as volunteers to go, instead of choosing by no certain or clear criteria people who definitely don't want to go and definitely don't want to procreate and spread the human seed throughout the universe? Not sure what they are, and I was willing to ask you about how you thought this out.
So yeah, so I think for, we don't really get a very big government perspective. We have that Nilsson guy who talks to her about the program and who meets with her a few times. Um, but I think in with this government, it doesn't. I don't think it's occurred to them that anyone wouldn't find it an honor to serve in this program. They think that this is, and I think a lot of, we don't see a lot of the outside reaction to it. In the earlier draft, there was kind of more of an outer world view on this that we could see, but she ultimately was chosen because she's someone who's going to benefit this colony scientifically. You know what I mean? She's really good at making things grow. She's really good at making things thrive in conditions that are, not ideal to thrive in. And it's that attention she's gotten from the science world for this algae that she's working on that has made her the selected person. They don't take into consideration that she doesn't want to go. They don't take into consideration that she's gay. They don't take into consideration any of these things because in their mind, this, the purpose behind this is so much bigger than any individual, and it's so much more honorable than any individual. And if you talked to any, when you the guy that she talks to, who talks to her about, what it's going to be like and how the colony is modeled and all of that, he believes in this. He's not like this villain, like he believes in this program. He believes in what it's doing. And it really just comes down to the fact that, like, she personally does not want to go. There's going to be other people who have been drafted who are really excited. There's going to be people who, um, it's not necessarily something that everyone's going to resist, but for her, she had no desire to go. There was absolutely no benefit. It was, it wasn't a positive thing. And then part of the, in choosing not to tell anyone around her, she just kind of further isolates herself because she knows something that no one else does. But I don't think I think the point is that the government doesn't take into consideration any of the things that matter to her, or that, any of her identities or anything like that. So I think it's really sad and I think it's really messed up, but I think that's kind of the point of creating this program. It's just, how do we how do we keep ourselves alive somewhere else, and we'll just send people who can benefit the colony in all sorts of ways. And they have to be a certain age, and they have to be, physically fit and all of that. But it's the science that gets her chosen.
Excellent. And I thought about that but in my mind, it would have made sense if, like, the government, knowing that she's there specifically for her scientific prowess, should perhaps try, talking to her about, look, Pilla, we're sending you there because you're such a good grower. You grow things. If you don't want to use your belly to grow things as well, we're fine with that, because your value as a scientist is, invaluable. So how about you just do your sciencey stuff there, and look, since we appreciate your work so much, you can take your girlfriend with you, and have her there to comfort you and offer you the much needed incentive for you to do this very important work. So this will be like the government negotiating in a democratic way with the person. From what I gather, although this element, as you've said, is muted in your film, is that such a dialogue is not possible between scientist Pillar and government who wants to send her. So if the dialogue is not possible at all, it means we are having a form of authoritarianism that is way beyond what the Canadian or any Western government, for that matter, is today representative of. We still have this possibility, because this is not something like, you should do your job that you've already been hired for, and the government says, well, pay your taxes, do your job, that's why we're paying you. No, this is something different, and somehow I feel like there's this looming element of, she does not obey, something bad will happen to her. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. It's like in the reality of, like, my world of this movie, like, there is no option for her to not do it. Like, the government is going to put her on this ship. They're going to send her. There, there's Canada is, Canada's a great country. I love living here, but we have a lot of we've got a really awful history in Canada of colonizing Indigenous communities, of, trying to assimilate, of even still today, there's a lot of inequality. There's a lot of economic inequality, resource inequality with a lot of these First Nations communities in our country. So, it's generally, we think of it as a nice place to live, and it absolutely is, but there's definitely elements of inequality depending on who you are in the country. And it's something that a lot of Canadians don't recognize and talk about enough. It's starting to be talked about a lot more now in the last couple years. But the Canadian government has done a lot of, this is a very extreme and, over the top example. We're sending you to space to colonize. And I mean, the idea that, like, oh, like, you don't want to reproduce because you're gay. We don't want to put you with a male partner, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, for the government, it's all about the economy, right? It's all about, we see with things here in Canada with the pandemic, a lot of the decision making is based on how do we keep the economy going. It's all about the economy. And when you're creating a colony and sending people to space, I think that kind of, dollar value on the return of everyone you send is going to be reproducing, is going to build the colony, is going to be more valuable than, Pillar's feelings or what Pillar wants personally. So it's pretty, it's pretty dark and awful stuff, but I think I don't think it's as unbelievable as as maybe it seems. I don't know.
Well, it certainly is a bit sad to watch as the character gets more and more depressed. And for me personally, I think that a good movie can create that certain type of environment in which the main character's conflict is believable, because otherwise, you know what, the brain starts finding options. That's what we do. It's probably more like a male thing. We immediately try to find solutions, and sometimes when I don't believe a character's personal drama or conflict, I start shouting solutions at the screen. It's like, do that,
Yeah.
come on, look, that's what you should do. And this is a problem with high-budgeted Hollywood movies. Scripts there are horrible these days, so I shout at the screen a lot. In my mind, obviously, I don't actually shout at the screen, but you know what I'm talking about. And I'm saying, look, please do that. No, you don't get it. Because that's when you sort of feel like the character is not nearly, is not even close to doing what you would do under the certain situation. And in this movie, the only thing was like, okay, the only shout I had at the screen throughout the movie was, come on, please try to talk to the government. Let's see that conversation between you and the people there. I want their opinion. I want to see what they would tell you, how they would treat your problem. Try to have a conversation. That's all. And I didn't have that. And I felt like, okay, why isn't she trying at least to have a conversation?
It's funny because usually, that's feedback that I get a lot on the movie, but it's never, why isn't she talking to the government? It's always, why won't she just tell her family? Why won't she just tell her girlfriend? Like, just have these conversations. And but I've never thought about it or discussed it in terms of why won't she try to negotiate with the government? And it might just be because, in the world in my head, like, the whole point is that she does have to go. It's not something that's optional. It's not something that's going, like, I already know the answer, so maybe I didn't explore it for that reason. But I'm not going to say that I'm not frustrated with Pillar. There's a lot of times throughout the film that I find myself, frustrated that she's, chosen to. I understand why she's made the choices she's made. I would make different choices if I was in her position. But there's definitely, and I talked about this a lot with the actress Bria. Like I understand, but I also disagree, and it can be frustrating sometimes. And it's something that I don't know. I just think the choice for me, the big choices that she makes in the film are not to tell the people close to her. I've never thought of her not, negotiating with the government as a choice, because I've always known that her not negotiating was because it would not have changed anything. But I've definitely been frustrated for her for other things over the years.
Well, yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm still lingering on this, but because you've shown elements of a political expression. For instance, there's this presentation in which there's a government guy, let's call him like that, explaining to a room of possible. I think some of them might actually volunteer or something, because I'm really sure. And there's like this group of women, dare I say they might be feminists or something, and they're talking about this person, I forgot the name, who died. Molly Mueller, that's it. And they're very vocal about it. And so to make a long story short and a long point short, the way they express their attitude and frustration in a very public political way makes me, the viewer, paint this world that you are depicting in the movie as something close to what we have today in the civilized world, where like the Western world, and where you can actually express political dissent without fearing, what former communist countries had. When somebody expressed political dissent, and Romania being one of them, you said something bad about the government, about the regime, you were sent to jail, or even worse. So, but this country, in which women like that can come and express their political views and their frustration, and hey, government, look what you did to Miller, you shouldn't have done that. That's a sign of a democratic society. You should know that, because when you see that, you automatically see women protesting, feminists. These are in a democratic society. They have the right to do so. So that's why throughout the movie I thought, come on, if you can do that in this society, you could at least talk to them, because this is not repressed. Those women are not immediately taken away, beaten, senseless, and put in jail. If I would have seen that, I would have said, God, Pilar has no chance. She has to go there. There's no talking to this government. There's no dialogue. It's just, the boot, slap in your face, go to jail if you refuse. So this is what contrasted in the way I perceived the world, the environment, the political background, and then her own choices, which again seem baffling to some people, although I don't think they're that baffling, because I know people who refuse to talk to their close ones. They close in on themselves, and they just, in simpler things than this, they refuse to say basic things. So that's not so surprising to me. I know people who are just like Pilar, whatever her motives are and her reasons. I think that there's something to do with her psyche and the way she communicates with people. It's just that I, instead of her, I would have tried at least to solve the problem in a different way, so that I wouldn't have to keep all those secrets towards my family, and could have said, well, look, I've tried everything else, it didn't work, and sorry, I have to go. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. I think I think I always thought of it in terms of like the women, they can loudly, dissent and disagree with the government because they don't actually, like, the government doesn't take it seriously because that voice doesn't do anything. Like, they just, ultimately they're still going to be able to do what they want. But I think it's a really good point that you're making, that, it doesn't give the viewer, the impression that this is an insurmountable problem, maybe right off the bat. So I think that's totally valid.
Okay, thank you, Jillian. And now, if you would allow, I would ask some of the audience members today, Christy, Andrea, Marius, or Alex, to ask anything, well, in decent terms, anything of Jillian. Who would want to go first? Who would like to ask Jillian any question?
Hi. Hi, Jillian. I'm not sure I'm gonna ask a question, but I would like to make some commentaries on the movie, and I will see as I make these commentaries if I have any questions, because the discussion up until now was quite thorough, and it answered a lot of the things I was pondering on while watching the movie, which I quite enjoyed. And I would like to tell you the aspects which I quite enjoyed. Because I do believe that it is a sign of good movie making. First of all, you have discussed the lack of any scientific background or devices or images into the science fiction movie. But even without them, the movie has credibility as being part of this genre. And I think that it's what makes movies great is the chance and the opportunity, even though it's not warranted, all of the time, but to adapt and to improvise when you don't have the means to do everything you need. So obviously, maybe if you had like $200 million to make this movie, the movie would maybe look totally different and have, that sort of blockbuster space exploration, all sorts of devices, all sorts of science stuff in the background, which would have made it more easily to be placed in a genre movie. Um, but at the same time, the fact that you can pull off a story without showing all of those things and still be credible that this happens in a certain near future where the government is a bit of a totalitarian government, and we feel that the threat is real, and things are going to happen this way. She will be forced to go to Mars, and believe that Mars is there. It's waiting for them. Makes for great movie making, in my opinion, because we see a lot of movies, low budgeted movies, and some of them understand this principle of not trying to push something that you cannot afford, and some don't. And then you have great storytelling, but that is sabotaged by weird visual effects that actually suck you out of the movie, and breaks that sort of immersion that you need and require to enjoy the story. Now, I would like to say that I sort of maybe this is the question if you intended it like this, but I quite enjoy the poetic symmetry between, you have said, Canada. It's a story, let's say, about Canada and the main character, and you characterize her as gentle. And I do believe this is a great part of at least how we see Canada outside of Canada, as a gentle country, as a very polite, very organized, very unwarlike, very unaggressive country. And this might be reflected in her, and it sort of makes sense because obviously Canada cannot be all of those things. Obviously it has its problems. Obviously it's a nation and it has to act according, to the needs and the ways nations act. But maybe this is part of the Canada which can be lost, or it's what Canadians should cherish most, and this is reflected in her struggles to fight off something which is not prepared to do, and because the struggles are new, and she has no defense mechanisms, and this is probably reflects in the ending as well, where it's a story about, at the same time, the lack of choices, and what happens when there's no options, but you force options and you force a choice, and you gamble in that situation, and the story turns even more dramatic in the end, because she is now responsible for something she didn't want to be responsible, which is her girlfriend being forced to, I believe, go to Mars, or right. That's what happens in the end. So I would like to ask if this sort of interpretation which I have about the symmetry between the main character and Canada as an identity is valid, or is just a figment of my, over active, over trying to find layers into everything sort of mind.
I think it's very it's very valid. Canadians, we know how we're perceived globally. We know that we're how we're positioned, um and a lot of those things are true. Like we are nice people, we are polite, we apologize a lot. Like those things are all true. But there's more than one thing can be true. And of course we have our own problems and our own histories and all of these things. And I think what is challenging is when Canadians kind of lean into that perception. You know what I mean? Like we joke about it a lot and we make fun of it, and it's, you know, part of our, you know, kind of national identity. But a lot of Canadians kind of stop there and say like, oh, well, look how great we are, look how great it is to live here. And you know, all of us live here by chance, right? Like if you're born here, you're born here. There's nothing you can do about it. But I feel like one of the problems we have here is that, you know, we're so close to America, and America has a different perception on the global stage. And there's a lot of Canadians that will kind of, you know, we just take the comparison between the two countries and we're like, oh, we're nicer, we're better, we're more peaceful, and then they're okay with that, and that's kind of where they check out of like further exploring our you know, our identity and things that we can do to improve or things that we need to work on. So I think having I like when, you know, people take more time to, you know, take a closer look or really look at the stuff that we, you know, that we try not to talk about or we try not to think about or we try to forget or whatever. And I don't know. I think it's a little frustrating when everyone, well, not everyone obviously, but when people just kind of generalize all of the good and refuse to acknowledge or work on any of the problematic things. And as a country that is largely perceived as like very positive and wonderful, it can be frustrating to get people on board with the idea that, you know, we also have, you know, our governments do a lot of things that are not okay. Our governments do a lot of things that are not equal. And like we need to talk about that and we need to address it and we need to, you know, acknowledge that it's happening and not just pretend like everything is great, which is another very Canadian thing. Pretend everything is great.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And thank
you.
you for your
Sorry. Thank you, Christy, for your question and your extended commentary, and thank you, Jillian, for your very sincere answer. If I would be allowed just a few more remarks, and let's consider them positive or helpful criticism. Would you allow it, Jillian?
Of course, yeah.
Because I do not want to make you feel bad in any way, but there are two things that bother me strictly from a movie making point of view. Nothing about the script, nothing about the underlying political themes, the drama, nothing. Just movie making stuff. So one thing, and this kind of relates to your Canadian politeness thing, is that when more characters are in a group, when they talk, they usually allow each other very politely to finish sentences all the time. Now, maybe this is what actually happens in Canada. I have no idea. But in the real world, outside Canadian borders, people in normal interaction, authentic interaction, interrupt each other. Even when they like each other and they're very polite, they do that because this is how the flow of ideas goes. And they usually overlap in talking. So the fact that it's so clinically correct and polite makes it seem a bit weird, a bit unrealistic when you hear these people talk. It's like they're always waiting for the other person to finish their line and then moving on with their line. And it doesn't feel natural. It feels like they're saying lines and not responding immediately, having reactions, going, no, you're wrong there, or something, or, yeah. They're always just waiting. And this is one thing that bothered me. And the other one is and this, I remember this. I'm not sure if you know Red Letter Media. Have you ever heard of Red Letter Media?
No.
They noticed, and it's something I started noticing after they noticed. They're famous in America. They're from Milwaukee, and they're famous for making a very long series of Star Wars reviews in which they absolutely trash George Lucas for the prequels. And one of the things they remarked is that the movie alternates between incredibly dizzying, dazzling action scenes in which your eyes can't stay focused on one thing because it's just a bonanza of everything moving, shooting, banging, blowing up. And dialogue scenes in which everyone, and they've noticed this, and they just put cut after cut after cut, everyone sits on chairs and couches and they talk, which makes the transition from dazzling action scene to boring dialogue scene so weird. And the dialogue scenes are so boring in Star Wars precisely because characters do nothing else. They just sit on chairs and talk. I'm saying this so for you, when I say the next line, to feel at least partially vindicated by the fact that such great directors as George Lucas commit what seems to me the same error, meaning that when characters talk in your movie as well, most of the times they sit on couches and sit on chairs. And there's this particular scene towards the end of the movie in which not her girlfriend, I think her sister, is shouting at her. She's very unhappy. She's having this emotional moment. It's like, Pillar, what the fuck? And she's sitting on a chair, on a comfy, very nice chair. And the feeling is that she should be up there, imposing herself. Stand up, be tall, project your anger. But she's gently sitting on a chair. So this happens a lot through your movie. And I was wondering, maybe, wouldn't it be a bit better if you could make these dialogue scenes a bit more dynamic by actually giving people something to do whilst they're talking and moving the camera around a bit and trying to catch them in a more dynamic relationship and not just people sitting around exchanging lines of dialogue. My opinion, sorry if it does not comply with what you feel about
It's okay. You don't have to like everything about the movie. That's okay. I do have a lot of people sitting and talking. I'm very aware of that. It's something that I don't know. It's just in those situations, it just felt like what they would be doing. I am someone who sits around and sits and has conversations a lot, and I often kind of have that dynamic in my own life, which is probably where it comes from. And then I also just find, I don't know, I find it's easier to focus on what people are saying if they're seated. And there's certain conversations, like the one where she's explaining to her sister she doesn't want to, like, she's not going to tell anyone. That was a conversation that I actually wished later that I had done as a fight instead of as a conversation. Um, but it didn't seem it felt like the natural thing for them to do to be to sit and talk about it. And especially for the sisters, or one of the sister is like 8 months pregnant also. So she's she's mobile, but she's probably comfortable sitting down sometimes. But with siblings, I don't know, you have the dynamic with your siblings, and kind of no matter what the stakes are, like, I don't know. It doesn't I felt like there was for the sitting and talking parts, I actually where it drove me crazy was like when I realized how much driving around there was in the movie. But the sitting and having conversations I was always okay with that part. Um, and then what was the first? Oh, the no one cutting people off. That is very Canadian. It's not something that I've even noticed as part of the movie. And if I think about, like, we have an election coming up in Canada on Monday, a federal election, and we've all been talking about it for a couple weeks. And I'm thinking about, like, this is a tough election. We're having these conversations, and I'm thinking back to all these conversations, and everyone is frustrated, everyone is angry, and everyone is waiting their turn to talk. It's very maybe it is just a very, very that's not to say we don't ever interrupt each other, but we typically do wait for the other person to finish. And you can always tell when someone is listening to you or when someone is waiting for you to finish so they can speak.
Yeah.
So
Well, excellent. That explains a lot. Actually, yeah, it is very specific of Canadian society, although it's usually nice to wait for other people to talk, but it kind of lowers the drama, the tension of a scene when just people politely ask.
It is considered very rude to cut people off. Like, if someone is in the middle of talking and you interrupt, it is considered very, like, that is rude, aggressive behavior.
Okay. I'm glad you told me, and I hope I didn't do it whilst you were talking.
It's
Okay, so Jillian, I just want to introduce, because right now Tim Goodwin, author director of The Witch's Mess, is here with us. Hello, Tim. Tim, can you hear us?
Hello, I'm just trying to figure this out.
All right, so Tim's from Australia.
Hey, how you going?
Well, hi, guy. And Tim, we have Jillian Acreman here. She is from Canada, and we were talking about her movie. Actually, have you caught on a bit about what we were talking?
I just jumped online about 5 minutes ago. A little bit, but out of context, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Are you able to catch me up?
Right, so I would like Jillian to tell you. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, Tim.
Hi,
I
Jillian.
should add, I have to go in about 5 minutes because I have a call time in half an hour. So I only have a few minutes more to talk. But we were talking about I guess the behaviors and the the movements and the blocking and the behaviors of characters, and whether it was choices or whether it was just because I'm Canadian, and that's that's kind of seeping into the work, and we just I don't know, just had a good long conversation about the movie.
Wonderful.
Okay, so Jillian is author of The Queen of the Andes, and that's the movie we were talking about. If you haven't seen it, Tim, we would provide a link in the Q&A chat panel of her trailer. And
Great, thank you.
so okay, glad to finally bring two people together, because usually it's just one person having this Q&A and then going away, and another person. It's nice to bring two of our guests together and talking. Wish you could have stayed for Tim's presentation as well, Jillian, but it's been a great pleasure to have you here. And I hope your movie will do well in our selection. And please do more movies and send them so that we can thoroughly analyze them and talk about them in the next few years, okay?
And thank you so much for your conversation. It's nice to be able to talk about it with someone and kind of, get into the juicy bits, So thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Thanks for being here. Okay, goodbye, Jillian. Christian Vikol